What's going on, Dolphins? It is your boy Dillon, and it's Tuesday, and that means it is day 2 of my roster slash free agency slash draft, preview, analysis, etc. So, I told you guys that this week I was going to be doing a series of videos doing an evaluation of the current roster, taking a look at some of the potential and interesting free agents that are going to be out there or potentially out there this offseason, as well as, some of the top prospects in the upcoming draft for whatever position it is that I'm talking about on whatever particular day. Yesterday, I did the secondary, I did cornerbacks and safeties. Today, I will be doing the linebackers, and you will see some similar narratives because, the majority of the team is, filled with young, inexperienced guys that don't have long resumes, undrafted players, etc. A lot of guys were rookies, so on and so forth. So, a lot of these guys, you're going to hear the narrative of, they should be in, training camp, etc., whatever, at least as bodies, and we'll see how things play out. Because, there aren't too many guys right now that are, superstars that are for sure things, guaranteed, etc. So a lot of this is going to be, speculation. We don't know, and frankly, since there's going to be a lot of turnover, we don't know if, a lot of these guys are even going to be here. So let's go ahead and get into it. Like I said, today is linebackers. Now, with the linebacker units, so for the team as a whole, I think that on the offensive side of the ball, the position group that we are probably the most settled at, the group that we have the most talent at, etc., is wide receiver. I think we have the most depth there. I think that's probably the position on the offense that is the least of need. I mean, our entire offensive line is garbage. We need a running back or two at least. We need, to fix the quarterback position. We need help at tight end. We only have like one legit tight end, maybe two, etc., right? Well, on the defensive side of the ball, I think that the linebacker unit is probably the deepest one that we have on the defensive side of the ball. The secondary, as I mentioned yesterday, is pretty much stripped. We have Xavier Howard, who's our, lockdown corner, but, he's had a few injuries, a few surgeries, and he's got the off the field stuff going on right now that hopefully can, be passed and put and left in the past. And then, we have Bobby McCain, and that's pretty much it. Rashad Jones likely won't be here for much longer. And we just need help. We need two safeties for sure. We need a corner opposite Xavier Howard, and we need solid depth behind them across the board. So, but with the linebackers are the unit on the defense that I actually feel is, the best. I think it's got the best quality starters and the best depth. So let's go ahead and get into it. Currently on the roster, we have linebacker Jerome Baker. He's 23, 2 years of experience, obviously out of Ohio State. I really like Jerome Baker. I've liked him since we got him. He was another one of those Gase picks, right? And so another one of those players that I feel like, or that made the Gase drafts really good. Like, the Gase drafts were really good, right? They just were, because they got a few players like, let's say, Xavier Howard and Minkah Fitzpatrick and Laramie Tunsil that are generational players or Pro Bowl players or All-Pro players or, superstar talents, right? They got those kind of guys. They got a few of those, and that's what you want. And then additionally, about half their drafts or so were hits. You can't hit on every single player that you pick, but you want to get, I would say, at least from my perspective, at least half of your draft draft class, you want to be a success each year. Now, what does that mean, right? It means that overall in your drafting, you have to be able to get, a handful of superstar foundational players, and then you need to be able to build a good team all around and have guys that are, quality starters, above average starters if they're not, your superstar players, and then, quality backups throughout. And that's what was happening with the Adam Gase drafts. So he was another good one. I really like Jerome Baker. He's obviously got, solid coverage skills. He's a smart player. He can get some tackles for losses for you, et cetera, et cetera. And he's definitely a great piece for us to utilize. Obviously, he's definitely going to be here next year. I find it pretty inconceivable that he wouldn't be. Like I said, I mean, the linebacking unit has probably the most, firmly rooted guys here. Then we have Vince Beagle, who is an interesting guy. He's 26, has 3 years in the league. We obviously traded for him. Now, initially, with that trade, it was, Kiko Alonso. It was basically a linebacker swap. Kiko for Vince Beagle, right? Now, even to this day, Kiko Alonso, I still think is the better player. I thought that then, I think that now. And it's without question, Kiko Alonso has the far better and more extensive resume, right? Has far more production, has a longer resume. Now, granted, Kiko Alonso has been in the league, I think, about twice as long as Vince Beagle. I think Kiko Alonso's, on like year 6 or 7 or something like that, right? So about twice as long, to be fair, but he has more than twice the production, far more than twice the production. But also, Alonso has, been dealing with some injuries, in more recent years as well. But he was with the Saints this year, and he did good things for them, and they made it to the playoffs, etc., etc. He didn't end up on injured reserve, but it is what it is. Initially, I thought it was a massive, massive downgrade. And just based off of, and to be fair, right, because I didn't, and I still don't know Vince Beagle personally, etc. But at that point, and frankly, even to this point, again, still the production is way different. Right? And so still overall, Kiko Alonso is the better player, etc. But the trade didn't end up being as bad as I initially thought, just simply because while we still lose a lot of leadership and proven production, etc., etc., he is younger. He is a younger guy, and he does have some upside and some potential. Now, do I think he's going to be the same quality player as him, or be as good as Baker or McMillan, whatever? Probably not, but he's definitely a good serviceable piece. He plays on special teams and does some good things there. But he's also a good, solid backup. I've heard some comparisons to like Rob Ninkovich, and I think that's actually pretty accurate. I think that he could be used in that kind of role. I think that he has some knack and potential to, get to the quarterback. And so my opinion of that trade has gotten a little bit more favorable. Now, I still wouldn't have hit the reset button, and I still would have kept all of those old players, including Tannehill and Kiko Alonso, Frank Gore, and Juwan James, Larry Tunsil, Kenny Stills, etc., Kenyon Drake, etc., etc. I still would have rather have kept Adam Gase and the 2018 team with another draft under that regime's belt than hit the reset button and do the fire sale, etc. But I do like Vince Beagle. He's obviously going to be around, and I think he will end up making the team again, and for sure be a serviceable piece without question. Moving on, there's Jamal Davis. He's a rookie, 24, out of Akron. I really don't know anything about him, to be honest, so I'm not going to say much other than, at least at this point, I would expect he'll probably be in training camp. And will be fighting for a spot somewhere on the roster or maybe practice squad. Like I said, I mean, he is a rookie, so, he's a young player that could fit somewhere. We just don't know yet. Then we have Sam Aguavin. He's got 1 year in the league. He's 26 out of Texas Tech. This guy is, he definitely showed some flashes and showed some potential. I think, out of the for sure things like Jerome Baker and Raekwon McMillan, I think he's definitely one of the leading candidates in the linebacker room for prominent time and a bigger role. Him and Vince Spiegel are really, so you have like out of the different tiers of linebackers, you have like Jerome Baker and Raekwon McMillan are like the top guys, right? The for sure things, you know what you got. They're going to be good foundational pieces, starters, etc. For that unit. Now we definitely need to improve overall as a whole in that unit, but those are your top guys that are for sure starters, etc. And then you have guys like Vince Spiegel and Sam Aguavin that come after that, who have the upside and the potential and really could be good, rotational pieces or used in specific for specific times, purposes, on specific downs, specific play calls, etc., etc. They could be and good backups, good guys, on special teams, etc. And then everybody else, like who was it? I forgot his name already. Jamal Davis. Those are the guys. That's the third tier of guys who are just going to be like, camp bodies to see if they can pan out. Trent Harris is another one of those guys, but again, young guy. He's got 1 year in the league. He's 24, and he had a few flash plays here and there as well, so we'll see if he can develop. Then you have Dion Lacey. I like him. I think he's got three years in the league. He is 29 though. He is getting a bit older, but he has shown some good things. I definitely think he's kind of, Dion Lacey to me is kind of like in between the second and third tiers. For a couple reasons. Because, like I said, I mean, he's 29 years old, so he's about to hit 30. He's a little bit older. He's kind of bounced around a little bit. Does have 3 years in the league. And he's never been, like, super consistent, but he has shown some good things. I do think he will be in camp, and I do think he stands a pretty good chance of making the roster going forward. Then we have Calvin Munson, again, a young player. He's 25, 2 years in the league. Don't know too much about him. Didn't really see much out of him. I'm pretty sure he did get some playing time, though. I'm pretty sure I recall him being on the field. But again, just another guy expected to be in camp to see if he can raise his level of play and earn a spot on this roster. Then we have Andrew Van Ginkel. As we know, he was a rookie this season. He's 24 years old. He was part of the draft class from 2019. And look, overall, again, the draft class from Flores and this regime's first draft class has been very underwhelming, to say the least. And that's putting it probably as fairly as you can put it, because at the end of the day, it's frankly not been a very good draft class. To be fair, it's only, that's an evaluation only on their first year, right? And I have said many times that it's perfectly fine to evaluate, year by year by year, right? But you can't give like a full concrete evaluation at least until they've made it through their rookie contracts. Even still, at some point, or sometimes you can't, say for sure, right? Like, Devontae Parker is an example. Took him 5 years to get there, and it was mostly because he couldn't stay healthy, but eventually he did put it together and put, at least for one season, it remains to be seen if he can do it consistently, but he did put together a career year, broke 1,200 yards, etc., etc., etc. So, we'll see if this draft class can improve and not look so disastrous after year 2. Hopefully that's the case. Hopefully they can do better. But in Andrew Van Ginkel's case, he was a mid-round pick, and he's, you know, okay, right? He's okay to this point. He's a young player. He can still develop. We'll have to see how that goes. But he spent half the year on injured reserve. He came in, got injured almost immediately, and then, you know, spent the half the season on injured reserve, and then came in, and he did okay. He did okay, right? He had a couple plays on special teams that were really nice, and then like 2 or 3 plays on defense that were nice as well. So obviously he's going to be around next season. He was a draft pick of this organization and this current regime. And obviously still a young player, and he's going to be cheap, etc., etc. So he's going to be around. He's going to make the team. I'm not really concerned with that at all. And as far as he goes, I just want to be able to see how he develops and if he can actually become, you know, a consistent player that does good things for us regularly at that position and on special teams. Then we have Jake Carlock. He was a player that we signed to a reserve contract. I really don't know anything about him. He's a rookie. He's 23 years old. Like I said, I don't really know anything about him, but again, he's signed to a futures reserve contract, so he will be in training camp and he will be, you know, fighting for a spot. Then we have Terrell Hanks. He's also a rookie, 24. He's obviously going to be in training camp. I didn't see much from him, but there were like a couple times where, you know, his name had popped up, you know, where he showed a couple flash plays. So, you know, again, another young, again, sticking to some of the same narrative as a lot of these players. It's just another young player. I know it's kind of repetitive and you know, sounds like a broken record, but that's what happens when you design your entire team to be, you know, full of rookies and first, second year guys and waiver claims and practice squad pickups, etc. A lot of it's going to be that, right? So he's another guy that's just going to be on the roster, and we'll have to wait and see if he can earn a spot, you know, and prove that he deserves to be here. Then we have, let's see, James Crawford, who was put on the injured reserve. He's got 2 years in the league. He's 25. Again, you know, I mean, we'll see what happens, you know, with him coming off of injured reserve. We'll see if they keep him or if they just end up cutting him. I mean, obviously we have, you know, a good amount of linebackers. We do need to have a 90-man roster, of course, for training camp. So, you know, he definitely has a likelihood of being back. We'll see. I don't really know much about him, so it's not, you know, all that easy to say much about him. Yeah, and unfortunately, you know, that's going to be the extent of a lot of these, the evaluation on a lot of these guys, because they're just unknown guys. Not, you know, almost nobody knows anything about him, right? So, you know, it is what it is. Then we have, obviously, Raekwon McMillan. It's his 3rd year. He's 24. He is not the best at pass protection, but he's definitely our best run-stopping linebacker at this point. He's obviously going to be on the team. It was another Gase pick, though, of course. Raekwon was a Gase pick, and obviously helped to start his development, but has furthered his development, you know, with this regime. I think that, again, he's our best run-stopping linebacker. He's without question going to be on the team going forward. And like I said, I mean, the linebacking unit is the unit that we are the most solid at on defense. You know, and I think that he's got good leadership qualities. I like him. I think he's a really good player, and I think he you know, definitely will continue to help this team going forward. He is starting to build up a little bit of a injury history, though. Again, he did end up on injured reserve, so we'll have to monitor that and keep that going forward. But I do really like him, and I mean, again, like I said, the linebacking unit certainly is the most solid unit that we have on defense. All right, and then finally we have Mike Hull. I'm not so sure. He is a solid special teams player. And he's probably likely to make the team over some of these other. I mean, he's got 4 years in the league. He is 28 though, and he has had some injury histories. So, and he really hasn't broke through onto the defense as much as we would like, and especially with guys like Vince Beagle, you know, on this roster. I don't know that Mike Hull's gonna end up being here for too much longer. I mean, at this point, it's likely though that he does at least end up in training camp. I don't know that he's going to end up making the roster though overall with all these other guys that we have. I mean, with, you know, Baker and McMillan for sure ahead of him. I would say, you know, Beagle and Aguavin are ahead of him, and then you have all these other young guys you expect to pick up more, and whether that it be via the draft or undrafted guys or in free agency. So I'm not sure Mike Hull's going to end up sticking for too much longer, but we'll have to see. There's at least a good possibility that he ends up in training camp, and he is really good on special teams. You know, he's not super great. He is a smaller linebacker though too. He's not, you know, like I said, he hasn't really broke through on the defense so much, but he is a really good special teams player. So that's the roster as it stands currently with our linebackers. We have our, you know, our tiers of guys. The first tier, Baker and McMillan. Second tier, Vince Beagle and Aguavin. And so, you know, that first tier are solid starters, above average players, right? Neither of those guys are really superstars. You know, may or may not eventually end up earning some Pro Bowl votes. It depends on if this team actually can get, you know, some success built again. I think that's going to have a lot to do with it. But they are definitely above average players. They're going to, you know, they're starters, etc., quality players, etc. And then, you know, Vince Beagle and Sam Aguavin so far to this point are like average with flashes, right? They're average players that showed some flashes. And then you have, you know, everybody else that's just kind of like the nobodies, etc., that are just like bodies at this point. But so let's look at potential free agents. Some of these guys, there are some big names out there, but some of those big names are going to come with, you know, rather large contracts and price points. Now, it's also worth noting, though, you know, we are going to have a new defensive coordinator. I think the defensive scheme will probably change less than the offensive scheme, especially since Josh Boyer was just promoted from within the coaching staff that was already here, and who knows, likely has some of the same philosophies. We'll have to wait and see how that plays out. But there are going to be changes, so, you know, we'll see. I mean, last season, you know, we went from playing a base 4-3 almost all the time to like a little hybrid, a mix of 4-3-3-4. We use inside, outside linebackers more than we have in the past. So we'll see, you know, who would be potential fits. But we have guys like Dante Fowler Jr., but he's got a $12 million price point from 2019. Nigel Bradham, you know, really good player. Danny Trevathan, Kyle Van Noy, Terrell Suggs, Michael Kendricks, Shaquille Barrett. By the time you get down to like Michael Kendricks and Shaquille Barrett, they had price points of only, you know, $4 million a year. Those could be, you know, guys that you could bring in relatively cheap. Bruce Irvin, Marcus Golden, Lorenzo Alexander, he's really good. Wesley Woodyard, Barcavius Mingo, Patrick Onwuasor, Darren Lee, Ryan Shazier. Well, yeah, I don't know if that would be a thing. Bud Dupree, Jamie Collins. I mean, there are a lot of guys out there, really. So, you know, if the Dolphins are smart, they could, you know, they could probably get some guys for relatively cheap that have high upside. Now, again, the linebacker unit to me is the best unit that we have on defense. So maybe one that they don't, you know, really do a lot in free agency. Honestly, I probably wouldn't do a lot with the linebackers in free agency. I would save that money else for other positions that you need more, right? Like let's say with cornerback and safety that I talked about yesterday, right? So I think that probably the best way to address that would be in free agency, because there are several guys out there like Trey Waynes who would be cheap, you know, certainly relatively cheap, but have good high upside that could potentially be good foundational pieces going forward. This, I would say, with linebackers, stick with the guys that you have on the roster and maybe just pick up, you know, a few more as, you know, undrafted guys, etc. Again, with the secondary, you only have like a couple guys for sure on the roster, so they need to address that mostly, I would say, in free agency, and then also in the draft. But, you know, maybe like mid to late rounds and then undrafted guys for those positions. Yeah, and then so as far as, to wrap this up, as far as draft prospects go, now for the draft, again, as far as linebackers go, I would probably take, you know, mid to late round guys, if at all. I don't know that I would even really use draft picks on linebackers, considering the fact that I think that we're actually all right overall there and one of our best units on the team. I would just maybe pick up, you know, again, I would stick with the guys that we have on the roster, and then, you know, pick up like maybe one or two guys, you know, maybe super late round or, you know, as undrafted. But some of the top prospects that are in this draft, again, this is from CBS's, you know, big board that they have. Their number one ranked linebacker is Kenneth Murray. He's 19th overall, though, on their big board. So the 19th overall player, regardless of position, but their number one ranked linebacker comes from Oklahoma, is Kenneth Murray. Then they have Zach Bound. Let's see, he's from Wisconsin. Then Akeem Davis Gaither from Appalachian State. That's their third best linebacker. Then Troy Dye from Oregon and Malik Harrison from Ohio State. And, you know, I don't think it's likely that the Dolphins will take an early round linebacker for sure. They could take one someplace in the draft, but if they were smart, they would, or from my perspective, if they were smart, then they would address that minimally, and really only maybe with a couple like undrafted free agents or like, you know, a late round draft pick, etc. So yeah, that's my evaluation of the linebacker unit. Again, to me, it's one of the best ones that we have on the team. It still needs some improvements for sure, particularly to help in the run game, but I think the run game will get better, or the place to solve the run game primarily is going to be with the defensive line. So I'll talk about that a little bit more tomorrow when I do my video on the defensive line. And yeah, so I like the guys that we have on the roster. I think it's the best unit that we have on the defense, and I think that going into this offseason, they should do minimal there. I don't think they should really be big spenders in free agency at that position. If you can get a young guy, relatively young guy that's going to be cheap, with high upside, then, you know, sure, you can take a flyer on him. But if anything, really just, you know, one or two maybe undrafted or late round guys would do the job. Nothing more than that. Yeah, so with that, I'm gonna go ahead and get up out of here. I hope you guys enjoy my videos and my perspective. If you do, make sure you hit the subscribe button, make sure you hit the like button, make sure you hit the bell if you want to get the alerts. Share my channel and videos with your friends and family. Leave your questions, comments, and concerns down in the comment section. And of course, as always, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Dillon Tartaro. And with that, I am out. I'll see y'all soon. Fins up.